Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Axel and Friends podcast. My name is Axel, back for episode 3 of the podcast. And in today's podcast episode, we're going to be talking about a very hot topic, especially because of one anime in particular this season, but it's always been a hot topic. We're going to be talking about anime changes to anime for the source material, whether that's manga, light novels, manhwa, video games, etc. We're going to be talking about the good, we're going to be talking about the bad, and we're going to be talking about the My Villain Academia. And if I'm going to be talking about My Villain Academia or My Hero Academia, it is only right that I bring on the main man behind the church of My Hero Academia. I've got AnikiSmashFSP. Aniki, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Axel, thank you for having me on. Bringing the full force of the church with me, Church of MHA. Every Sunday we come on, we discuss. We try to give the story. We usually sidetrack into other stuff too, but it's really important to really have these honest discussions, and I kind of enjoy having this group discussion. So I'm hoping you pop up too, just like we're talking here, and I already know we're gonna have a good conversation because of the pre-recording stuff. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you're not breaking off into random tangents here and there, can you really say that's a good conversation? Can you really?
That's a fair question. That is a very fair question.
Because if you're just sticking to the rails, you're just playing bumper bowling, and that's not as fun or as risky as regular bowling. And that is a really weird analogy, and I will probably never use it again.
But I get what you mean, because to a certain degree, if you're playing it so safe that your My Hero conversation can't somehow turn into a discussion on the desensitizing of Americans due to regular gun violence, are you really discussing whatever materials you're engaging with to their deepest possible reaches?
No, you are definitely not. So
that actually happened on a stream. I know.
Oh my god!
Yes. I ended up finding the website for it. That turns out we've had, even during the pandemic, there was 10 or 15 mass ones a month.
Oh boy! Well,
yeah.
On that note, and that random tangent about tangents. Oh my god! So, like I said at the top of the podcast, I wanted to talk about changes to anime because more often than not, there aren't necessarily a lot of changes to anime. It's usually more so the long running stuff that seems to be getting it more often than not. Because with the short adaptations, usually it's pretty by the book. They might elaborate a little bit more on something here and there, but more often than not they kind of stick to the script. But it's a lot of the long running stuff especially that seems to get
there's two specific niches that seem to get these wild changes. It's either, all right, I know we've been following the script pretty well for most of this series, but check this out, or it's haha, this series shouldn't be one season or 2 seasons, but we're gonna shorten, hyper condense this story for some reason.
Oh, I wonder what you could be talking about with that one. Cough, cough, God of High School.
And then everybody who knows the plot is sitting there what? And then the people who've not experienced it are sometimes wow, I had fun with that. Didn't make a lot of sense, but I had fun with that.
Yeah.
And you're just well, it used to make sense.
And that's the thing, more often than not, I'm someone that, I have read the manga first for several things, and then I watch the anime afterwards. But there are certain things where I am anime only. I was that, for example, for The Promised Neverland, and then I found out by episode 1 of season 2 that everybody was just oh no. Oh no. And I was just oh no.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about The Promised Neverland's decisions, because I was one of those people that the last arc started to get kind of weird for me already. And then the second season happened and I was yikes.
Yeah.
Yikes on bikes.
Oh man. It was not good. It really wasn't. Um but that being said then, so the way that today's podcast is going to be going about, we're going to be opening things up with My Hero Academia, because like I said, it is really the hot button topic right now for this season, with the decisions that have been made for the story. After that, we're going to be talking about some of the good changes to anime, because there are good changes to anime. Not people necessarily talk about it, because people like to talk about the bad changes that have happened, but we will
not to mention
get to it.
Good changes usually like overwrite your memory of what the manga was. Like,
Yes,
when the anime adapts something super well, you're just like, well, this is the canon version of this event now.
yep, yeah, and more often than not, because it gets the nod from the author. They're like, all right, this works, let's do it. Unless you're Black Clover filler, in which case the people at Studio Pierrot were like, we apologize for stepping on your toes for things that are supposed to happen later, but we covered it now. So,
Yikes.
Yeah, not fun. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Studio Pierrot, everyone knows Studio Pierrot at this point, because they've covered all of the biggest long-running shonen, and they just pack them full of filler, which I do want to get out of the way. Yeah, they had Naruto, they had Bleach.
They made Yu Yu Hakusho.
I think they made Eyeshield 21 too. I could be very wrong on that. I still feel like it was on TV Tokyo regardless, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that in today's discussion, we won't. This is at least me saying this. We won't necessarily be considering filler or anime-only endings for ongoing manga titles in like the bad side of things, because filler is filler. Like, that is.
It's not the series. It's it's an auxiliary thing, but that's not necessarily inherently a change to the overall structure of the series itself or the story.
Correct.
In fact, filler is designed to not impact the story, so it's like it's a lack of a change to the story that is usually the ultimate problem with filler, is that it technically adds nothing.
Yes.
And people get frustrated. So it's a lack of change, if anything.
Yes.
So we wouldn't want to include that in this dialogue anyway.
Right. Though there will be one exception to that rule once we get to talking about Naruto, because I do there was a very good point brought up about that. So that is the only thing that is gonna kind of be like the exception to the rule. But like I said, it's not gonna be counted as a bad thing. Or as an example of a bad example, just because again, it's not necessarily detracting or anything from the story, nor is it like necessarily like just wildly changing things. So yeah. But that being said, we can just go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off. Oh, still there.
Okay,
there we go.
Yeah, for some reason it like popped your audio out of my speaker for a quick sec. So it was coming out like, yeah.
I heard the Windows notification, so I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, we're back. It was my plug was being weird and wasn't charging my laptop, so I was like, wait, let me not shut down in the middle of our recording.
I know that feeling. So, all right. Well, might as well just kick things off right away then. So, like I said, the big topic to be discussing and what spurned on this podcast topic for this week is My Hero Academia. And as a lot of manga readers know, the order for season 5 with the plot for My Villain Academia has been moved around with the Endeavor Agency arc in the series. And for a lot of manga readers, they are very upset by this. But at least in my own personal opinion, this should not be counted as a bad change yet, because we don't know how it's being fully executed yet, since it's happening on a weekly basis. But as the leader of the church, I definitely want to hear what your opinion so far and kind of background with the My Hero changes, what you're thinking about it.
So there's a lot of things that I think, and some of these are intangibles that on our side we would never really think too much about inherently. But we all understand that in art and like getting your art on TV and doing all these things, there's always this layer of corporate scrutiny, like, suit and tie guy telling you what you can and can't draw or say or whatever. And not only is there that, but then you also have different like cultural norms, character like popularity trends, and then there's just the whole there's more than one way to like tell the story type situation.
Mm-hmm.
And with My Hero specifically, I agree that this doesn't have to be counted as a bad change. One, because we haven't gotten the full, span of what's to happen yet. And while there are some things that so far look to be cut out that I, as a manga reader, would have very much preferred to see have seen adapted, like the Redestro commercial potentially not actually getting to be seen, that's a major blow, I think, just because it does like kind of help people see the understanding of like comic book culture that Horikoshi has, so it kind of diminishes some of what would have been its marketability in the West to a certain degree, which when you're focused on like these changes being more or less marketing based, that's a weird oversight to make. So I'm just hoping that commercial just pops up later, and when we finally are about to get a real proper introduction to Redestro. Because in addition to that, it would have been important to highlight the different stages of mania within his character, because he's one of those characters that I think a lot of people misunderstood on their first reading of him. They saw him as this really like cold and calculated, overly, but he's always been like this emotionally wild zealot. So I think they could have done a lot introducing all the phases of him, so I need to make sure they keep that. But what they've decided to do is that they know that villains aren't necessarily that popular. Like the only two villains to crack the top hit 10 in My Hero's character popularity polls in Japan ever are Shigaraki and Toga. Like twice is like 20 something or lower usually. Dabi's usually not in the top 20. Like most of the villains don't poll that well. And so when you have these people who aren't that popular getting a whole arc in the middle of a season, you're risking a lot of viewership dropping off. And at the end of the day, TV shows are partially about ad space. And if Japan tunes out because they don't want to quick jump to the villains, and then they just end up dropping it throughout the season, then that hurts My Hero's chances of renewal and all these other things. So instead, they switch over and go to Endeavor Agency. We've been getting this build up. Like Star Servant makes it sound like he's been sent to, after Endeavor. We all know that the ending thing is going to come, and we're going to know he got information. And it kind of switches it into a thing where we now know that the Meta Liberation Army exists. We know they got 100,000 people. We don't fully understand what they are. We got that sneak peek of Shigaraki. So now, even if the villains aren't necessarily popular in Japan, especially when you remember, I'm pretty sure you've seen it, it's taboo to be doing this in Shonen Jump, blah, blah, blah tweet from the...
Yes. Yep.
The CyberConnect CEO, which is another thing that should have warned people, like, that when the CEO or a COO of the company that makes most of Shueisha's games, the one that's gonna make the Demon Slayer game, the one who's making like Naruto Arena and stuff, or involved with that stuff, like you realize that if he's saying that and that's a Shueisha company head, then a lot of the Shueisha company older heads are gonna feel some kind of way about that arc too. So you got to kind of bait everyone into going along with this and like build it up as this bad thing, so that when we're switching perspective as far as these old like folks are concerned, we're switching perspective to build up these villains as the threat they are. So now it's okay. Whereas in the initial telling of My Villain Academia, it's not supposed to be, hey, I'm building up these characters just as threats. You're supposed to be looking at them and understanding like these are people who have had their stories and they've come to this point. And so it kind of plays into like their lack of comfort with seeing villains as people, because like the whole point of Twice's character is that at the age of 16, he's criminal, like he's considered like a criminal or a felon, and then he's forever stuck in the system because people won't hire him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a story that like you hear about all the time in the real world.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's like, so, and that is like a problem in Japan. So like, if you paint it that way and like you can tell it's being depicted as an issue, then suddenly it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be treating criminals like this and we should be giving them a chance. But now it's just like, well, this is just another thing that led to him being a bad guy, is how some people could potentially perceive it. Or at least that's the excuse they can give them in painting, like in doing this arc now, so that they don't have to get as much pushback. And what it'll do is like allow the Deka City incident to be like the finale. And I think personally that while Endeavor and the kids versus ending is a nice, powerful moment, it's supposed to be a quick, dirty, and fast fight. Like they're not supposed to be like getting this 3 minutes of Sakuga fest. Like it's gonna be quick and dirty.
Mm-hmm.
This Shigaraki versus Redestro is the final conflict of the season, though. That's ominous.
It's a lot more
You know,
grandiose too. Just
right, like you're
general.
going out like, holy crap, like this is this, and then you're finishing the season with Shigaraki apparently being slated to gain even more power after you just watched him level a city.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, oh man, what's happening? Oh boy, next season's gonna be terrible. What's gonna happen? These guys are screwed. Oh jeez.
Yeah.
And then season 6 rolls by and Bones doesn't have to worry about getting canceled for doing one of the best arcs.
Mm-hmm. Which I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I've been rambling, so.
No, you're right. And this is why I brought you on the podcast, because I want your opinion on stuff. So that's all good. You bring up a lot of really good points with things. Like the fact of the matter is, Japan doesn't necessarily want you rooting for the villains. Especially for a shonen series where shonen is all about, well, at least for the battle shonen side of things, the good guys taking on the bad guys. So the fact that you have an entire arc dedicated to one villain group taking on another villain group, you're supposed to be rooting for one of the villains either way, and people or the higher ups of Jump and whatnot are just like, shouldn't do that. So, and by all means, like, I get where people are, slighted still with how this is being rearranged, but you bring up a really good point of, and I think a lot of people aren't necessarily appreciating this, the fact that by doing this reshuffle, you're having season 5 end on a more dramatic note than if you had kept it the way it is and ended things on the Endeavor Agency arc. Because, I mean, like, just looking at season 5 as it is, there have been so many people that have just been ragging on season 5 and just being like, oh my god, get Joint Training arc over so we can get My Villain Academia, get to it. And unjustly so, in my opinion, because Joint Training had some of the most amazing Sakuga in all of My Hero Academia so far.
Real quick, because I love to talk about like physics and MHA and how you can tell people who have super strength, even if they don't directly state having super strength, because of characters like Bakugo, who, if you remember during our final exams, fires off the gauntlet, and then like when Deku is actively using his super strength quirk, tries to fire off the gauntlet and almost dislocates his shoulder. So it's like, no, Bakugo is physically so buff that his base body is stronger than 5% Deku. Like, just from having to deal with his own explosions.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that Bones did really well is that during the chase down scene during round 4, is that instead of Bakugo like going in a straight line and then just immediately banking left to turn left, he actually puts a brake on in front of him to, like, does another explosion so he turns around. So he does a triple explosion spin so that he can actually do a left turn. To highlight that, like, you wouldn't be able to get like such a sharp turn. So it's like Bones put a lot of detail into the Joint Training combat movements and stuff, and I'm like, come on guys. You clearly weren't actually paying attention to like what Bones was doing. Instead, you were throwing a tantrum on your phone.
Absolutely. Like, by all means, joint training isn't necessarily some, oh my god, this is major plot heavy stuff. No, it's a way for them to show like how the various students have grown, as well as just showing that like, hey, 1A isn't the only class with super powerful quirks in it. But
And
you
it
have
was more
people that are just like,
motivated.
I want story. I want the villains because the villains are the most important part of season 5. And it's just like, we'll get to it, but calm down.
And like the irony was like for me is that the whole point you like if they were complaining about how the whole point was that Deku and Shigaraki are both like setting up for unlocking power at the end of these arcs, and that's why they're supposed to come back to back because it's like, oh, Shigaraki a bunch of allies, and Deku uses his allies, and in the process unlocks a new power. But we know that Shigaraki's going to be getting a power because he talks to the doctor about it at the end of it. Boom, boom, boom. If they were having like a nuanced complaint because they were like, well, these two arcs being stacked back to back together, like helped create these story loops, and then because of that the pacing looped it so that the end of that core would have been Deku unlocking Black Whip. But like now what it's going to be is like the end of this core is Shigaraki gaining power, the end of the first core is Deku gaining power. So instead of it being back-to-back arcs, it's back-to-back core finales. So even then that narrative, so it's like there's not a whole lot of good arguments outside of this is just how it was originally given to me and I want it that way. And that's not exactly like a completely fair criticism because again it ignores the larger picture. Because I've also seen people be like, oh man, anime onlys are confused, they don't know who the Meta Liberation Army is, like they don't know what's going on yet. And I'm like, consider this, it's a mystery.
Yeah.
It's a mystery. It's a mystery for them. Like it's supposed to be something that keeps them on the hook and confused and wanting an explanation.
Yes. And that's the thing, is that like the vast majority of complaints that are happening for My Hero Season 5 are from the people that are manga readers. That's it. It's not that it's necessarily been a complaint from the anime onlys, because at least for what's happened so far, it's been constructed well. Like, anime onlys, if they didn't have like the manga readers essentially just shouting in their ears is like, this is wrong, they wouldn't know any better. And that's, you know, like that's perfectly fine. And in a way, I'm gonna speak positively to what's going on right now. Like, it is a positive, in my opinion, that we are getting the Endeavor Agency arc right now, because it goes to show that because the events of the Paranormal Liberation arc happen before the events of the Endeavor Agency, and what's going to happen is we're going to flash back to it eventually. It shows that just because that happened, it is all the more ominous that it isn't more well known right now. Like, for all they know, nothing has happened. Like, nothing has happened like in this time other than a minor incident in another city. But in reality, the groundwork has been laid for a much more grandiose evil operation. And I think that's really good. But again, you have people that are manga readers that are saying, oh, this is not how it's supposed to be constructed, so that inherently makes it bad. No.
Especially because you have characters mention the Hero Work Study program that the commission set up in response to something, but they don't know what. So now you have people talking about the Hero Commission set this up in response to something. You have, we know, like at the start of Endeavor Agency, something happened on that day. We had the cutaway, like the cut to Shigaraki. So instead of Endeavor Agency being used as just an arc that we ultimately, because when Endeavor Agency happens after My Villain Academia, what it actually becomes is like, okay, yeah, we already know that this work study is just them training. So we're like, okay, so this is a training arc. And then we're like, okay, cool, it's a Todoroki family drama arc. This keeps the anime onlys invested in the action portion while also allowing them to be invested in the familial portion.
Yes. And honestly, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, because like we were like, all right, cool, like we know this is a training arc. We know. Whereas for the anime onlys, it's like, okay, cool, they're on an internship. This is dope. Like, we all knew something worse was coming, like, guaranteed, after this internship. We were like, yeah, they got to do something, because what they got now ain't enough. They get to come into this feeling like, oh yeah, the heroes are mounting an offense, they're planning for something, and then we're gonna see what they're planning for, and then they're gonna walk into season 6 getting slapped with something even more dangerous than what they initially thought, and it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I think I honestly want to ask the question once the season is over, and be like, all right, now be honest with yourselves. Would you have been as happy with the ending of season 5 if it was Endeavor Agency compared to what you are getting right now with My Villain Academia? Like, based on the episodes that they are giving us, would you have felt the same impact if we ended the season and had to wait for season 6 on Endeavor Agency compared to what you're getting with Shigaraki in My Villain Academia? And honestly, I think people won't like it the way that it was done in the manga, with like the Endeavor Agency potentially having been the end of season 5. It's not going to be as impactful as it is right now. It's a nice way for us to conclude Deku's training and for him to actually be able to start using Black Whip rather than just spurting out a little bit and being happy about it in front of Mount Lady. Like, we get like more of a conclusion to that, and then we get an actual grandiose conclusion with My Villain Academia ending out the season. I think,
especially because I feel like by that point too, I missed the villains. What have they been up to? Even besides just the notion of like, what have they been up to for mystery? But also, we really haven't seen the League this season. Oh, because you also don't want to have another Demon Slayer, and I don't mean in the sense of like, not in the. It did look sales wise super popular, blah 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 blah. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that Demon Slayer went crazy with the trending on episode 19, then put out like 6 to 7 more episodes that made almost no noise.
Yep. It's the same thing right now. And like, Demon Slayer more or less didn't have a choice in that regard, right? Because to round out like the 2 course thing, they had to go with the plot that they had. It's not like they could move that around like My Hero has liberty to do. So, yeah. Like, I completely agree. I think this is the way to successfully build things up all along this time. And you are right. It has been a long freaking time since we have seen the League of Villains. Because the last time that we saw the League of Villains was at the halfway point of season 4. So, like, it has been a 2 course season's worth of time since we've actually seen them, which just builds up even more to eventually seeing them again.
And like, the other thing is that Western fans will be like, oh, I put My Hero on the back burner because of EA, and that's fine, because unfortunately Western views just don't matter as much. Even though My Hero makes a killing over here, you would you would think for if any series paid a little more attention to its Western audience, it would be My Hero. But
right. But that's the thing, is that like, and this will be an eventual video topic of my own, but like, in the end, Japan's opinion matters more than the Western opinion. The Western opinion is a drop in the bucket compared to Japan's opinion, because Japan is getting the direct sales at the end of the day. That is how it is.
Yep. Like, if volumes were coming out at the same time as in Japan as they were in the US, then sure, they probably take a lot more consideration in that, just because they'd be like, oh wait, this one is a profitable region, maybe we can da-da-da. But like, it's not the case, so it doesn't matter. And so they're always going to kind of like build around that. But like let's look at Jujutsu Kaisen, for example. We finished, like, we could have, if they wanted to, they could have finished with the school exchange arc, right? Or like the exchange event arc. But then the last episode of the season would have been a baseball episode.
Yeah.
And if you remember, JJK was originally slated for like 22 episodes.
Yeah, and it would not have left off on as an impressionable note.
It got episodes added
with the curse paintings. Yeah.
Yep. Just so that we could finish off on like an actual good, and then we got to finish off with the double Black Flash.
Yep. And just
Way more
amazing
powerful finish.
Sakuga, yeah.
And we got Megumi's Domain, double Black Flash, back-to-back episodes for the last 2 episodes of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal finish. So like studios are like, Mappa is doing a lot of stuff wrong. We're not pretending like they aren't. Nobody pretend like we co-signed Mappa Slate.
Nope, absolutely not.
But it's important to note that studios are paying attention to how they finish a season out, especially, and the best ways to like maximize the story. And with the My Hero rearrangement, I guarantee you, there's going to be a lot of Western Twitter that decided during JT they didn't care. That's going to see that one bit of trending and be like, I guess it's time to catch up. I guess it's time to catch up. I guess it's time to catch up.
Yep.
And then they're going to love it, and they'll be like, okay, I guess I was asleep. And that's how it's going to work. And then, boom, everybody's on board once the next season starts, and that's what they really need.
Mm-hmm. And
Manga
I think...
readers, yes, will be there anyway, but making sure the anime onlys want to come back, priceless.
Yeah. And I think we will potentially finally see more villains get higher up in those popularity polls once we do get My Villain Academia animated. Because, I mean, that is... A lot of the time, the popularity polls are directly correlated to the anime. Like, even though, obviously, like, popularity polls are combined with the manga side of things. But I just want to see Earthquake Boy out of the top 10 because he does not deserve to be there.
Okay. If Dabi's dance hits the anime audience and he doesn't finally like crack top 10 and just stay there, I will be very surprised.
I agree.
I will be hurt, actually, because I'm like, nah, like once that gets animated, I feel like he has to just like start winning finally. Like, come on.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Well, that being said, those are at least all the points I had on My Hero Academia. Was there anything else that you wanted to say before we moved on?
Nah, especially on the My Villain Academia side of things, I think we've done a really good job covering that. Like the only other stuff we mentioned is like it was just another topic when we were talking about good shuffles is how or like changes, and that's coming up, so that's fine.
Yeah, which I do want to say, which transition us in, like My Hero Academia isn't the only example of an anime shuffling around plot. Whether it's good or bad, you do have other series, especially ones that are more episodic, that do get shuffled around. Like on the rom-com side of things, We Never Learn was an example of this. Although, that being said, they kind of took the route of, we're not going to have further anime after this, so that's why they did shuffle it around. So, in my opinion, because I liked We Never Learn, I'm sad about this, and this is a bad example. But Mob Psycho 100.
Like too.
Oh, sorry, say that again?
I actually like We Never Learn too. My theory to that, though, is just kind of because when we got to the endings, we got multiple endings.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of influenced, because it was like, we're not going to do a different set of core for each ending. Like, I figured they weren't going to do that, and they just were like, all right, well, we'll just wrap this property up because that's going to get too complicated in later seasons.
That's very possible. That definitely could have been the conversation when that was being done, rather than what they did, where they were like, yeah, well, here's a nod to show you that like this was the original intended ending, and even though that it was done while it was still ongoing. But it is what it is. Rom-coms, it's very rare that you even get like the actual ending to rom-coms nowadays. Like the vast majority of anime adaptations of rom-com manga never get the ending adapted. Like the fact that we got a reboot for Fruits Basket years later so they could actually finish the story is incredibly impressive, when that doesn't happen the vast majority of the time. It just doesn't.
I would say Fruits Basket. So what it comes down to with a lot of these shows, and this is something that like applies to the West too, because I even had an argument about this on Twitter, and I was like, you need to understand that even though the anime is based on the manga, the anime is what actually makes the money. because it's the anime that creates a bunch of extra secondary merch deals that like keychains, all that other stuff.
Yep.
Fruits Basket specifically, I remember a couple years ago, like I think it was like 2016, 2017-ish, where there was a girl at my job who was talking about how, oh, I just bought a Fruits Basket like pencil case. Fruit Basket is probably the only like rom-com anime slash manga that I could remember people talking about buying merch for within like the past like 4 or 5 years before it even got a reboot.
Yep.
So I think they recognized this was probably a market we could have finished, and like that person was like 30 something. So it's like not only is that a possibly a market you didn't tap all the way, but now in theory these people have way more money. And everybody is going to be willing to check back on their childhood stuff. I watched every episode of Dragon Ball Super. Do I think Dragon Ball Super is like super elite stuff? Not really. Mm-mm. But did I still watch every episode? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just cuz.
Yeah.
So, same thing with Fruits Baskets. Like, they realized, okay, there's a market here. Which means, in my opinion, with Fruits Baskets getting to do this and have like the complete third season, we should... Maybe I'm not gonna say like next year, but I would say like in the next 5 years, don't be surprised if we finally do start seeing some of these series actually, get to completion, or we get like another one that's kind of like older, revived, just to test the waters a little bit more.
Oh, absolutely.
They're getting the toy sales.
Yeah.
Like one of the biggest things is, do you sell merch?
Mm-hmm. And that's why, for me personally, anytime that I've talked about like anime reboots and whatnot, that's why I've always had like Maid-sama as like the top of my list for getting a reboot over like other like shonen titles and whatnot. Because like if it's one of those series where it will succeed in multi-channel revenue, they'll go for it. And with the success of Fruits Basket, it is very possible that like a lot of the anime studios will be like, all right, let's go back and actually finish these rom-coms. And hopefully we get to see more of that. Because like I said, the vast majority of the popular rom-coms just never got to see the ending that the manga had in store, just because they just never adapted that much. But it is what it is.
Also, because we were talking about shuffling, let's talk Promise Neverland real quick.
Fair enough. Because
Promise Neverland would have been an excellent toy seller if they hadn't shuffled its plot. And I mean that sincerely. Like, one, let's be real here. I have like 30 Funko Pops, possibly more. I have duplicates. I have triplicates, because there's like 3 different All Mights. There's 2 All for Ones. There's like 3 different Degus.
Yep.
You cannot tell me that the TPN children, like Phil, all of them couldn't have gotten their own like on the farm.
Just naming one of them, just Phil.
Phil, Emma. I can't remember everybody's name anymore.
I know. I just thought it was funny.
Oh, what's her name that got merch? The one with the bunny.
Oh, I don't want merchandise of her. That would just be painful. It would be so sad.
Like a Flopsy plushie itself.
Mm-hmm.
Sonju, like, and her like the immortal girl who ends up being the magic MacGuffin of it all, and her warrior companion would have easily made good figures. Yugo, did you end up reading TPN?
No, so I still need to do it. I got like 3 episodes into season 2 of The Promised Neverland, and once I heard that Goldie Pond got skipped, it was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna put a pin in this right here, and then I never got to it just because the sheer amount of manga and anime that I read and watch is kind of crazy, and the anime left a bad taste in my mouth, so I was just kind of like, I'll put The Promised Neverland on the back burner.
So, like, do you mind like a light spoiler?
Yeah, it's completely fine.
Alright, so like we do get adults later who have escaped farm.
Yes.
So, like, Yuga was one of the adult characters who was living in a bunker that they like find,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like central to several plots, which is why as soon as people saw that Yuga wasn't there, they were like, oh, because he teaches them a lot. But like that in of itself would have generated toys because you would have had the military training kids. You would have had you would have had like a lot of opportunities to just resell like Funko Pops and stuff like that of them reskinned because there's parts where they're all learning how to train and use assault rifles. Who
Mm-hmm.
doesn't want to own an 8-year-old holding an assault rifle? You
Well,
know,
I don't know about
as a
Japan,
figure.
you know, just say.
Like that, but like that's like the most American thing ever, right?
Yeah, American, not necessarily Japan. Well, well, maybe
Yeah.
back in the day, but we're not gonna go there.
Yeah.
Oh god,
But like you get what I'm saying. Like, there's
I
like a
do.
lot of like they so like by crunching that plot, it was already one of the most popular series too. Like
Yeah,
CPN season one was a star child
yeah,
where there's many people who would argue that it was one of the strongest opening arcs to a series in Shonen Jump ever.
yep,
So it's like you wasted like and yeah, I don't think everything was as good as I think Goldie Pond got close to that first arc, but I think that first arc just had a lot of they end up being very different stories. So it's like that arc was like this crazy murder mystery type plot, and it's like you can never recapture the murder mystery vibe of like that first arc.
yep.
Like the rest of the story is just a completely different beast. So it's like, yes, it would have been harder. Yes, they might have seen some dissension and pushback, but they still definitely would have come out ahead in like finances continuing that series in my opinion than just sitting on it and like killing it in that season 2 and cutting out like 70 chapters,
Mm-hmm. Oh.
especially because like the manga would have also gotten like a bunch of back sales too, so like it all around it very confusing decision.
Yeah, I heard that the Blu-ray disc in Japan for season 2 like sold 300 copies in its first week, and you've done something wrong when your Blu-ray disc sales are only 3 digits. is is bad.
Especially with the series like TPN,
Yeah.
because it was literally a top 10 selling manga like annually at different points. Like I think it was up there at least twice. So it's like when you have a top 10 selling manga of the year property selling 300 copies on Blu-ray, yeah, you messed up
Mm-hmm.
bad.
You messed up bad. Yep. Well, in terms of at least a good series that did shuffle around the plot, I think one of the at least the anime that the anime community kind of rallies behind, Mob Psycho 100 is an example of a series that did shuffle around the plot. But that's also because it's one of those series that's more episodic if you've read the manga. So, like, which I haven't. I admit that. I still need to read Mob Psycho 100. But, like, it goes to show that, like, you can shuffle something around in a positive way. Like, I don't know if I could imagine Mob Psycho 100 if it was arranged differently than what it was. I don't think a
I
lot of
think
people
that
could.
like the idea of Mob being borderline episodic originally kind of throws me off, but then I think about like the initial premise because it's like, you know, like technically him going and handling these cases.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, from that standpoint, yeah, that can kind of just be done whenever. Like you can just drop different cases and just like that can be different stories. And so I'm like, okay, I guess that does work as an episodic, but the way in which it was serialized for the show, I'm like, I wouldn't change anything. Mob is actually one of those ones that I actually do agree is a masterpiece. Like when people are like, "Oh yeah, Mob's a masterpiece," I'm like, "Yeah, you can call it that. I like that."
Absolutely. No, I completely
Like,
agree. And it's school life too, which like that is another example. Like a lot of school life stuff is very episodic, and because of that, they can kind of shuffle things around or like pick and choose like things that are like work better than others. So like that just kind of happens. So for that, it was just like a perfect amalgamation of those two aspects that made it work.
And I also think it's worth noting that we should want. I'm not saying we should want anime to change like things necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but we should want the medium to be explored in its own right, in its own merits. Um, so like when things are being kind of shuffled, sometimes it's based around like, well, would it be organic for a camera to sit in this angle for this particular moment? Would this, um, or like would this seem like a little too gaggy? Like one of my favorite Shoto panels is like when he's like slurping the soba and just staring at Endeavor. But like as an actual in anime thing, it would have been a little out of my hero's like directing style to like sit there and put the camera on his face as he was slurping.
Mm-hmm.
Like that wouldn't have been like the kind of humor that technically goes inside the series. So sometimes it's just the medium acknowledging that it functions differently and then planning around that.
Right.
And that which is something I like. Like there's certain things that you'll get in manga that cannot be replicated in anime.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we talk art.
Yes.
Or like if you ever get a like when you get like those cool spreads where you can tell like the arms are reaching through the panels and all this other stuff, like, you're not gonna get like the anime will not be able to convey that same effect for you. It just won't, because the thing that makes that like thing hit that way is that it's a manga page being drawn like.
Yep. The same thing with the art of the page turn, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Like that is something that is very hard to capture that same kind of effect in anime. Whether it's, like an action fight, which Sakamoto Days, I think, is a perfect example of that. Sakamoto Days and the art of the page turn is fantastic. Just because Sakamoto Days is fantastic with its fight choreography, I still think it's one of the best in the magazine right now. Or on a completely different side of things, Junji Ito, with the horror aspect of it. Like, Junji Ito's art of the page turn is insane. And that was, oh my god, talk about a bad anime adaptation. Man, the Junji Ito collection was not good. For more reasons than that, but... Ugh.
I kept like trying. I was like, I should check that out because Junji Ito's like a certified goat. And then I was like, it was like something in my brain was like, don't do it.
No, you don't.
Don't do it.
Don't watch the Junji Ito collection. Read his various books. That being said, I am very excited for Uzumaki once that releases. But even then, I will temper my expectations just in case.
It's very important to not create too many crazy expectations. It's one of those things that I feel like most of us who've been watching anime or reading manga since we were, wee lads, a lot of us got started on Ninja Scroll at the age of 5.
Not me, but if you were, more power to you.
Look, the big meme with that movie, is that almost nobody that I know watched it at an age where it made sense to be watching it.
Makes sense. Yeah. No, that's fair.
But like, it's not like you always have to kind of accept, especially if you were a book reader. Like if you read books growing up, like if you were like, oh, I'm big into novels. If you read the Aragon series, the Inheritance Cycle, that right there should have taught you a powerful lesson in expectations. Or if you're a fan of the Percy Jackson books, should have learned after that first movie, like right there, boom. Be careful what you expect out of like any TV type situation. You gotta temper yourself and understand that things aren't gonna go according to the script you have in your hand.
Well, thankfully, on that note, though, on a tangent, Rick Riordan is involved with the Percy Jackson TV show that is being made. So, my expectations I will allow to creep back up again after the movie.
Exceptions to that one.
Yes.
And the reason why I definitely will give Rick Riordan his props is every time he comes up, I love talking about this. One time I saw him tweet specifically. He like quote tweeted somebody and he was like, you guys, I always hear you like bash the movies and understand like for you guys it's watching something you really loved and enjoyed as an entertainment piece get torn apart. But for me, it's like watching my children get massacred. so it's
Uh-huh.
like, so it's like he is so public in his hatred of those movies, and I just love that from a creator because so often they like try to pretend like, oh yeah, it's still good. Like no, he's like it's an embarrassment and a disgrace to my work, and we gonna fix it. And I ain't playing with these people this time.
Yep.
So refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, I think just to get a better taste in our mouths, we can definitely transition into talking about good changes that have been made to anime from their source material. Because again, like I said towards the beginning, there are more good changes that are made to anime than there are bad ones. We like to focus on the bad ones because we as a society just like ragging on shit. That's just kind of how it is. But like, good things do happen.
The amount of times like I'm like, oh look, some random Twitter tweet has like 5,000 likes and a bunch of retweets, and it's like, oh yeah, this person is blatantly like wrong about something, so let's retweet this to death so we can all hear about it and can't escape it from our timeline. That's what we want to do. I'm like, guys, can we please like put this like, and I've said this many times. How about you guys clip and tweet things from the channels you like that you feel like are actually knowledgeable instead of the ones that piss you off?
Because liking things is square behavior. You don't want to be a square. You wanna ratio people. That ratio culture, man. That's what's cool.
Look, man, sign me up for quadrilateral camp. I will be the squariest nigga out here.
I myself am a rhombus, so I understand where you're coming from. But anyway, so I collected a bunch of examples on Twitter of both good and bad examples of changes made to anime, and I will mention pretty much every single one of the ones that came up. So for the random people that like commented and you're actually listening to this podcast, thank you for both submitting something and listening to a podcast that is already over 50 minutes in. So thank you for being the real goats in that regard. But I categorized a lot of the different examples of both good and bad changes that were made. And the most prevalent category for good changes is more in-depth character moments. Because especially in manga, there are times where you will have certain things that just get touched upon briefly, or just straight up breezed right on through with just no looking back and whatnot. So there are examples in anime that we get to cover that give us more, and give us a more well-rounded experience. And one of the perfect examples of that is Naruto. I think, and I mentioned this to Aniki before we started the podcast, I'm someone that, like, for Naruto, specifically, not Shippuden, I watched the anime, and I did not read the manga until years later. Holy crap. There are so many things that, like, just don't happen in the manga. Like, you might get like a page or something and that's it. Whereas the anime actually got to elaborate on things. Like, perfect example of this is the 10-10 versus Tamari fight in the Chunin exams. Because in the manga, Tamari just, like, you see the announcement of the fight and then you turn the page and Tamari has already just bodied 10-10. Bodied her. You don't get to see her techniques. You don't get to see anything. You just see 10-10 done. At least in the anime, they gave her a fight, and they made us like actually appreciate like how just freaking strong Tamari was. But like,
yeah, that's the other thing is like off screens can sometimes be like, oh man, that was. But like when you're introducing a character, I almost never find the off screen to be a great way to show us their power.
Yep.
Especially in like this case where we had no idea what Tenten's skill was like, really.
Uh-huh.
Like we had seen Lee and Neji, so you could assume she was up there, but like we never really got any proof. And later on in the series, it kind of seems to strongly suggest she was never on their level, even. So it's like that off screening meant almost nothing. But at least when we got it in the anime and they fought, it was like, oh snap, that's the way she's moving. Okay.
Yeah. Because, like, if it wasn't for that fight, like, in the manga, you don't get to see what Tamari can, or sorry, not Tamari, Ten can do until that arc in Shippuden where Guy's team goes to meet up with Kakashi's team. Like, that just goes to show you don't get to see, like, Ten do anything otherwise in that time.
I'm pretty sure Tenten was originally handed the keys to beat Madara, and then Kishimoto forgot.
She's like, you get a gourd and a fan instead. That's what you get, Ten.
They were special sacred artifacts, and then like just nothing came of them.
Yep. So like,
and I'm convinced he just forgot that she had them because he couldn't remember her.
Yeah. For all the people that rag on Naruto for Sakura or Ino, Ten literally was the butt of the joke for that series. But most people watch the anime rather than reading the manga, and so they're like, oh, I mean, Ten's whatever. But like, if you read the manga, it's just like Ten ain't shit. That's just how it is. But another good example though of like expanding upon fights was Hinata's fight against Pain, which was funny enough brought up by Sasuke was right on Twitter. So perfect name for this. But yeah, if you read the Hinata versus Pain fight in the manga, like she gets like Ten bodied within like a page, and then Naruto blows up, compared to like the anime where she puts up a fight, she struggles, like she does all this
stuff. The twin lions.
Yeah, like you get to see more of that rather than just like, oh, Hinata's down, like like. So I appreciate in that regard that the Naruto anime did expand upon those things. On the non-fight side of things, you had Shikamaru mourning Asuma, which was definitely important. This was brought up by Trevor Tiger. Just going to show, like, expanding upon emotions is fantastic. Like,
so Shikamaru is my favorite character because, in my eyes, he does operate like how like a ninja would operate, like how you think normally, right? Like he's also an extreme pragmatist. So he's kind of like, I really don't want to be here. Why? Because it's effort and it's dangerous. But also because he's always aware that this is effort, it's dangerous, it's time to be serious, he always approaches things from, how do I protect my soldiers, my pieces, and utilize them correctly so that I can, go ahead and maximize and win, and like use my assets correctly. Which is why like him and Asuma talking about like that climbing silver, also just his relationship in general with Asuma throughout like the anime gets like little extra scenes, I'm pretty sure, throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So that in of itself, it just enhanced that whole arc, which is probably one of my top 3 post Shippuden arcs.
That's fair. That is fair. Because oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, like, you don't necessarily get a lot of impactful death moments in Naruto, like, as much. Like, I mean, by all means, like the third Hokage in the original Naruto, Zabuza dying, yes, those are very impactful. Other than that, like, obviously you have a bunch of villains that do die and whatnot, but like Asuma was one of those casualties in Shippuden that was just like, oh, we're hitting home again. Like good people are dying, and there needs to be more impact about it.
And we had seen, Asuma and Shikamaru's relationship in the Chunin exams, And like you think about how like one he like backs him up against the 8 or 9 sound tuning he had locked down, but also just kind of when he was explaining, Shikamaru's a genius, and he would like make it a point to play shogi with him so that he could at least be engaged with him in different ways. Which, when you find out he's got a kid, it was like, oh man, all those things we saw him build up with Shikamaru, he would have put into his child. Asuma would have been a great dad, and he's not going to get to be one.
Mm-hmm. It is like I appreciate the gravitas that they put on it in the anime. So like it is definitely appreciated. And I wish we would have gotten more than that in the manga. But critically speaking, for the Naruto manga, there are just a lot of characters that get little to no like elaboration whatsoever. And like I mentioned again at the beginning of the podcast, while I'm not considering filler for the most part in this podcast, World D Champion brought up the fact that like the filler actually gave us more information on characters that were just flashes in the pan in the manga, especially with like the tailed beasts and the Jinchuriki. Like in the anime, or sorry, in the manga, the only ones that we really get to learn and care about are Gaara, Naruto, and Killer Bee. Where at least in the anime, we actually get to see and learn more about the other ones. Like,
yeah, because we get some filler arcs, I think, with... I think we get one with, like, the Three Tails, is it?
Well, I know the Three Tails was more so involved with Killer Bee than anyone else. I know that there was filler arcs for the 6th and the 7 Tails, though.
There we go.
And then for the Three Tails, they made a whole thing where there wasn't a Jinchuriki host for it, even though in the manga, the last host for the Three Tails was one of the like former Mizukages from the water village.
Because Kisame ends up hunting down the Three Tails by himself or something, and he like straight up 1v1s it or something is the point.
Yeah.
It's used as a hype tool to explain that Kisame himself is sometimes referred to as like the zero-tailed beast or a tailed beast in of his own right because of how extensive and powerful his chakra reserves are and whatnot.
Yeah, but in the manga, they just you see a Jinchuriki introduced and they get like instantly murked, or in some cases they're not even shown at all. And then like you got like art pages from Kishimoto, but like otherwise, like until the war when they got resurrected, you never got to see them. And it's just kind of like, well, there's a major plot device that just kind of got glossed over entirely.
It's like you could have done more with that, but like it's like I understand why you didn't do more with that. It's just like, man, like somebody said, like I like when stories are efficient in the sense that they don't like have random padding, like where I don't feel like, oh, we're just like waffling around. But also sometimes I'm like, all right, but maybe I could have got a little more there, just a tad more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so yeah.
No, I agree with you there. I will say, and this is another example from the list, moving away from Naruto, One Piece was another one that did have a little bit more elaboration on certain characters in the anime. As mentioned by It Ain't Me Foo, another name that I just love from Twitter. Zorro was a character that got to have more backstory in the anime than was presented in the manga. Now that being said, Oda does, for a lot of characters, does a lot of work explaining backstories and whatnot. But it was interesting to note that like in episode 135 was, in the anime at least, was where Zorro said that like, I didn't come up with the pirate hunter name. That was given to me. That wasn't something of my own choosing, which I thought was kind of interesting. I didn't realize that wasn't him like choosing that.
Like, that was like a moniker he was given.
Yeah, I mean it fits with Zorro, but like
and I do like that he still is pirate hunter Roronoa Zorro, even though he's the right hand of the quote fifth emperor. But you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say also for One Piece though is Wano. Like, just Wano is a massive change as far as like compared to how it was done in the manga versus the anime, because it's been heavily expounded upon in the anime,
Mm-hmm.
largely for the better. Like, um, like from actually like fleshing out the interactions between like Hawkins and some of the characters to uh, Oda. Okay, so like let's take Zorro versus Kamazou.
Mm-hmm.
Oda did tell you that that fight took a long time, but the way he did it in the manga is a way that is so subtle that I don't think people properly appreciated it.
Right.
Because like in the bottom right hand corner, he basically took a panel and broke it up into like four lines. And when you look at each of the four lines, it's like it's snowing, there's less snow, there's no snow, and then it's snowing again. And then you cut back to the fight. And so like that little bit, like those like four little lines were supposed to let you know that they had been fighting for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Oda has to cram a lot of stuff into each chapter, and like it is unfortunate that like certain things get glossed over, but the anime has been expanding upon those things. Now that being said, it was also mentioned as a complaint, for like the bad side of things. Two people on Twitter, Emerald, and funny enough, somebody by the name of Zoidbay, which was a Zoidberg Jinbei fusion person. That was interesting. They commented that they didn't like the fact that One Piece was using reaction shots and like doing a lot to pad out episodes. And I get that. I do. It's just a tactic that they're using so that they don't have to do filler, because they are walking the thinnest of tightropes with Wano.
The thing that I'll use as an example of like bad One Piece change was, were you current on One Piece during the Reverie arc?
I've been current on One Piece since 2011.
All right, so yeah, you remember like Reverie every week we were like, ah! Everybody was like losing it.
Mm-hmm.
But, and unfortunately, like that channel got copyright struck to death. But there was a conversation I remember having during Reverie where I was like, "Oh, guys, wait! I just realized something." Like, what? And I'm like, you notice how like each of these, like when we meet these princesses and stuff like that, they're getting these little panels that show like the characters in the background. I was like, every single one of these panels is going to lead to a flashback. Yeah. They're like, don't. They're like, no, no, don't curse us like that. I was like, nah, bro. Think about it. It's like, yeah, it was like a 5 to 6 chapters got turned into like 12 episodes because of enough flashbacks being used. Yep. So yeah, sometimes, yeah. I just wanted to at least give them their props for Wano.
Yes, and I agree. Like, Wano has been fantastic. In my opinion, the Odin flashback is at my top for like One Piece anime, just because of how well it was done. Like, dear lord, One Piece without Luffy was actually incredibly interesting. As much as I love Luffy, the Odin stuff was just amazing, and it was animated so well, and I appreciate so much that they did the movie style of animation for the Wano arc. It's just been been fantastic.
You know, and that's something that I actually really want to give Toei props for, because for a very, very, very long time, they would not. They were very basically terrified of doing episodes without Luffy in them, because of the ratings would drop so hard if Luffy wasn't in an episode. And so for them to be like, okay, we're at Wano, we're not going to try to intersperse with random like during the current time Luffy scenes or anything like that. We're actually going to dedicate it to this, you know, like give Odin his own time. Is I do want to acknowledge that, just like how we acknowledge, you know, them changing things up for MVA. I want to acknowledge that they did take a risk with the, like, based on statistics, they took a risk given the track record of the way people drop One Piece episodes just because there's no loop.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. All right. Another one from the good side of things. Somebody by the name of A9 Grow commented on Fullmetal Alchemist 2003, where they were a fan of there being more focus on the homunculi. I myself, so fun fact, I myself never finished the 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist because anytime I turned on Toonami to watch Fullmetal Alchemist, they always played the same 3 episodes anytime I turned on. So I never got to finish Fullmetal Alchemist, but
I did get to see 2003. Think about it, there was more focus on the homunculi, so that was cool, but they also changed a lot of the homunculi story. Like,
right.
Isuzu's son was Wrath.
Mm-hmm.
And he, like, okay, so what was cool about that character, though, was that he had Ed's arm and leg. So he was a homunculus that could do alchemy because Ed's arm and leg, when they went through the gate, got attached to his body. But I don't know. It was an enjoyable change. I will say that. I think giving them the extra time and like a couple extra backstories and making them more characters, especially in the case of like Gluttony, because the Brotherhood Gluttony basically got put on dig a hole duty.
Yep.
And then that was like pretty much all he did.
Yep. Same with Sloth for that matter, but like Sloth also got introduced much later on. Yep. But yeah, it is what it is. It could also be kind of incorporated into the whole anime only ending because that is what happened with 2003 Fullmetal Alchemist. But
anime only ending, and I will say that Sloth being Ed and Al's mom, or the homunculus from their mom in 2003, was probably a better choice or a more enjoyable and engaging choice.
It makes it more interesting than just a guy that's just walking.
Buff.
And buff, yeah. And then the last one that we could talk about, especially since you brought it up, was My Hero Academia. Because there was things elaborated on in the anime that weren't so much in the manga. And you yourself, the specific example that you gave was the All Might versus Nomu fight.
So, All Might versus Nomu in the manga, like, okay, this is a choice of, like, the directing style and, like, adding more to the scene because of the fact that, yes, All Might firing off a bunch of blows and, like, being like, yeah, I fired off 300 blows, and Nomu, like, fighting off and then him just, like, launching it. That's cool and all. It shows, like, the overwhelming strength of All Might. But what makes that a powerful character moment is showing that strength juxtapositioned with the vulnerability of All Might. So when you've got him getting hit in the ribs and you can actually see him struggle with that and him like having to like drop the thing up, throw it in the air and like really give her the speech through actions and like getting to see, which is the case of using reaction shots very well. Everybody kind of, as he's struggling, it just emphasized what was going on with All Might and the struggle that he was facing, like internally and externally, so much better. That I just really, and that was also the start of the when you charge up a one for all big smash, you get the, as it's passed through the generations in the background, like a constellation thing. So one of my favorite motifs in the whole series is like when they go for the big smashes and you get that. So
I do love that motif. It is very good.
Especially, you know, when you think about the Camino delivery. Oof. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just wonderful change.
Yeah,
was honestly the scene that made me love My Hero, like, and be like, all right, I'm gonna really give this series its like time of day and like focus in.
Absolutely. One of the examples I personally had from My Hero, and yes, I do recognize that this is filler, but I appreciate it as good filler, was Suyu's first work study with Selkie. I thought that was actually a very good addition to the anime because it once again showed another outlet for hero work other than just straight up, oh, here's a bad guy, beat him up. So I appreciated that we got to see more, especially on like the seafront side of things with Suyu and working for Selkie.
I'm pretty sure that that's another one of those stories that was co-signed by like Kohei Horikoshi, where it's supposed to be like a, yeah, like I gave some input on this so that it could be like fleshed out, so you can very much assume that it's supposed to be kind of canon. And you do see Selkie during the war arc.
Mm-hmm.
And the drop kick that Sue uses during joint training is actually angled the exact same way as the drop kick that Selkie uses. So it does kind of seem like that's what like the story's been trying to build up to, is like sometimes like he's retroactive. Like, no, yeah, that part is canon.
He does that with the movies. That is
Yeah.
a big thing, is that like the movies were not canon until the movies came out, and then he was just like, yeah, now they're canon.
Yeah. Or like at the very least with the second one, we had Nine in the spread. So like Nine was revealed to be a canon character and a side mission that the League was sent on. Which retroactively Mocha explains why they were able to have so many extra duplicates and why they had so many twice clones. But yeah. So little small stuff like that he doesn't fully explain until later, so that only manga readers or like people who are like looking at volume notes plus manga stuff can find out. Like Endeavor's costume is heavily implied to have been made by Melissa because it uses the same compression tech.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that covers more than enough the more in-depth character moments. I think another example of good changes is when an entire scene or even series gets reworked in a new way. Two of the biggest ones that come to mind would be Devilman Crybaby and Dororo.
Both bangers.
Yes. Danielle specifically brought up Devilman Crybaby with the aspect of like the track running, Rio unveiling the devils on television. With both Devilman Crybaby and Dororo, they're very dark and edgier versions of an original manga. Like, the original version of Dororo by Tezuka is a lot campier and obviously in the style of like Astro Boy compared to the more modern version of Dororo that we got, which is kind of crazy to see, just like that sheer difference between the two. But a lot of people really liked modern Dororo, and obviously with Devilman Crybaby, like, I mean, people were just going nuts over that anime.
Devilman Crybaby made me cry.
Yeah.
Look, Devilman Crybaby is like one of those anime that I haven't rewatched because I'm not sure if I'm ready to feel that again.
I'm not.
Especially that episode 9 where they got the signs up and everything, and they put that on the stick. So,
yeah,
like that scene, yeah.
Hey,
that
it's tough. Like, I will forever appreciate the one watch through that I had of Devilman Crybaby, but I can't go back. I can't go back to experience those emotions again. I can't do it.
And with Dororo, I actually got my lady into it, but she got to episodes like 4 and 5 where, you know, we meet Mio and the kids. And I love her. She's a romantic. And unfortunately for her, she got attached to Mio and Shakimaru.
Oh no.
And she was like, oh my goodness, this is so cute. I love this. I was like, please stop loving this.
Oh no.
She's like, what? Don't love this. I was like, don't love this. And then, yeah. So that one, I was like, no, you got to watch this episode, part 2 to this with me. You can't. I was like, don't go home. Watch part 2 here.
Yeah.
But beautiful story. Like, and it utilizes its characters well, sets up things well. Its OPs actually foreshadow stuff. Very well put together series for the modern work.
It is funny that the original version of Hyakimaru from Tezuka's version could just speak regularly and could pop out his eyeballs. It's just, when you think of that compared to what we got with the modern Dororo, it's
interesting because it's like they toned down they both like turned down and up the horror, I guess, in a way. Because you could argue that like being able to pop your eyes out is, you know, just like body horror, but
which they eventually did when he did grow his own eyeballs. But yeah,
but like when it's more about like he's earning these things back, and he's like fighting for keeps. Like when his leg gets bitten off by the giant centipede thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's like this certain permanence and like fear of like what he'll lose or gain and like what's on the line. Especially when you look at some of the later stuff that he like the later fights where they pull up with the buffs and stuff that he had to get back from the humans.
Mm-hmm.
Like just a lot of like I know that like it creates a different kind of like terror. I want to say like it's a more you really have to sit there and think about what's going on type vibe.
Mm-hmm. But either way, for anyone that somehow hasn't watched either of those two anime, definitely give them a watch. I know that it's harder for Dororo since it's on Prime Video, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Speaking on the more narrow side of things, for reworking just a scene or whatnot rather than the whole series, Seth the Sin mentioned for Seven Deadly Sins that he appreciated how they reworked the Gother arc in the Seven Deadly Sins anime. One good example of changes that were made compared to all the bad animation things that happened in Seven Deadly Sins, but I digress. I guess for me, the more impactful one was learning about Sword Art Online's changes. Because a Twitter user by the name of Sintaste mentioned that the light novel skipped from the beginning to floor 74 right away with Kirito meeting Asuna, whereas in the anime it gave us the Christmas story, the Crystal Dragon, and the Pet Tamer stuff. Like, I can't even imagine like Sword Art Online without the Christmas story. Like,
Okay. So what's wild about that to me is that I always felt like Sword Art Online. How do I put this? I always okay. So I always say that like, my biggest criticism of Sword Art Online is that it feels underwritten. Like I always say, it felt underwritten because I'm like, you give us 100 floors as a concept. You like yeah, we see him and like hit up a couple of them, and then we go all the way to 74. But that was my anime based interpretation. Like I felt like this was underwritten. So to find out that like
the light
half
novel.
the story wasn't even in the light now. I'm like, yo, this was them adding to it. Oh wow, like,
yeah,
like
no, that's insane. In the long run, that is insane. That like it just skipped from 1 to 74 like that without giving us some of the in between stuff. Because that the in between stuff is what like gives Kirito so much more characterization, like, and like showing more of the seriousness of it and like the consequences for his actions and whatnot. Like I'm shocked. So kudos to the Sword Art Online anime for doing something good with it before everybody started ragging on Sword Art Online because that was the popular thing to do.
like, do I think that it's like Sword Art Online? I think isn't even that bad. I just think that a lot of people were tired of isekais, but also a lot of people hadn't experienced isekais, and those people ended up meeting each other online finally.
But
Because I do think that Sword Art Online kind of came out when anime was starting to go really mainstream.
yeah,
So
but that
it's
was
like,
when isekais weren't as heavy in the market. I mean, they were like the light novels were in Japan, but like on the anime side of things, they never really got to that point yet. Like, so that's just kind of crazy to me. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, the concept of an isekai was a thing before it was named isekai by certain people. But
in fact, let me change that. I think it's more over harem anime specifically
fair.
have been a thing for so long.
Yeah.
So even if you add an isekai element, it's still like this still feels like familiar territory because everybody is stupidly in love with this dude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like being an isekai can't save you from another like larger glaring trope that you're using. And then isekai became just like this giant trope too over the last couple of years. So
yeah.
in like hindsight, people realize that like, oh yeah, SAO wasn't that bad. And I myself was just like kind of disappointed. Like I wasn't like this is the worst thing ever. But the fact that I actually know someone who loved Sword Art Online so much that his first daughter is named Asuna still blows my mind.
Fair enough. I mean, I'm dating an Asuna cosplayer, so I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. Like, it just, like, I was like, man, I didn't think it was that great. Like, all right.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just another one of those series that became popular to hate because it's popular to hate.
Yeah, hating things is fun.
Yeah.
How dare you like things?
Mm-hmm. Well, that being said, the one other category of good changes, and I'm just going to gloss through this in all honesty, would be introducing characters either earlier or introducing characters that didn't exist in it, period. Sefson, once again, he mentioned in Gintama, they introduced the character Kaguya earlier than introduced in the manga, and for Konosuba, they added Rufian, who is not in the light novels whatsoever. I'm iffy on introducing characters that are new. I actually think that this is also something that can be bad. Because that was the case in anime like Toriko and Twin Star Exorcists, where they added characters that either shouldn't have been there or shouldn't have been there at that time, and I think it just made them worse. But there is a reason why people don't talk about the animes for Toriko and Twin Star Exorcists, so that's kind of what it is. But
for the amount of hype I've seen for Toriko, like every now and then, from obviously before everybody was like, wait, Shiram Kumbo is a creep. But like, I used to see a lot more hype for Toriko. Nobody ever really gassed the anime up, though.
Yeah, which the whole him being a creep thing, like, that happened before Toriko. It's just that people didn't start talking about it until much later with Rurouni Kenshin's author. They were like, oh, well, Toriko's creator was like this too, and like, again, that was before Toriko was even a thing. Like, the series prior to that was the one that got canceled during that run. But yeah, I do love Toriko. I've actually said this on multiple occasions that it is my favorite manga world in manga, which is crazy to people that have never read Toriko, or their first impressions of that author are Build King, which is, oh my god, I'm not even gonna get started on that because that's gonna be a long ass tangent, so I won't. But like, yeah, the anime wasn't great. I mean, they did give him like an anime collab thing with Dragon Ball and One Piece, so that's a thing.
Oh yeah,
but
I've watched that special before.
Yeah, that's a thing that happened. Just three guys with massive appetites in worlds that really do not go together, but it is what it is. And then, just because it's funny to mention this for no other reason, somebody by the name of Markster said that they liked the anime adaptation of K-On! Because of literally everything about it. So I just thought that was funny to mention. So, not that I think Markster will necessarily listen to this podcast, but hey, you get a shout out. So, yay for you. But I think it's time, now that we're an hour and a half into the podcast. It's a long one, but that's A-okay. Let's talk about the bad changes to anime, because that's what people are really here for. They want to hear about the bad stuff. They don't care about the good stuff. And so we've already mentioned some of the bad stuff. Like, we've mentioned slow pacing stuff with like One Piece. We've mentioned adding unnecessary characters.
We talked about TPN earlier.
Yes, and we talked about TPN earlier.
Things.
Yep. And that's really the big category, the big one for bad anime adaptations is fast pacing and or skipping plots altogether. And that's really the big one, and why a lot of ones are as bad as they are. The Promised Neverland skipped Goldie Pond and condensed the rest of the manga into a single course anime. That one's bad. Hinamaru Sumo personally one of my favorite Jump sports series about sumo, condensed a lot of its first half of its entire series into a 2-course anime. They still did it really well, but like they skipped an entire tournament and character development for one character from the manga, which
Okay, and that's okay. I want to talk about that real quick because I remember seeing Hinomaru Sumo come up a decent bit when the anime was first coming out, and then it just died. Like I don't think I've seen somebody talk about it since like the first month the episodes were coming out.
well, I loved Hinamaru Sumo. Like I said, it's one of my favorite sports series from Jump. I'm still reading a lot of the retro stuff. I digress, but Hinamaru Sumo I thought was really good. But I watched the anime first, and then I read the manga, and there was a lot structurally that was changed from the manga to be made into the anime adaptation. I don't think that the anime adaptation is necessarily bad, because I did enjoy it, but I'm sad that the structure got changed in order to accommodate that 24 episode frame that they had to work with. Because like the first tournament was very important to the story, and very important to the development of certain characters, and that got changed for the anime. But it's fine. I consider this one of the less egregious changes compared to the other ones that we have on our list. And before getting into like two of the big ones, I did want to mention Berserk 2016, because this was something that was mentioned by Zoidbay again, as well as Remake Salty, that they skipped certain character development and whatnot in the Berserk 2016 anime, as if that anime wasn't bad enough as is. Because
man,
oh boy, and even today, the anime studio has issues with their anime. Because I mean, Spider Isekai, like, they had to delay the final episode because of production issues. So just, whatever. And having CGI characters next to 2D characters, it's whatever. I mean, but
just sometimes it's okay to be ugly, right? Like, it's not a sin.
Yeah, which I completely even forgot to put Spider Isekai on this list. Apparently, Spider Isekai did a lot of changes from its source material to the anime, which a lot of people were not happy with. I'm anime only for Spider Isekai, so I don't really know as much, but I heard that they condensed a lot, and that's crazy considering even Spider Isekai was another 2-course anime. So
this mentality of like, if I condense it, they'll like it. Because like you can tell that the mindset is like, maybe they just only like the really raw swaggy moments. And it's like, no, that's not what most of us are only here for. Like, and without these structures, like it doesn't hold up. So like hyper condensing, which we're gonna get into.
Yes.
Actually.
That'll be the one that we end things with, because I have input on that one as well. But yeah, but the other one that I would say is the most egregious for fans of it would be Tokyo Ghoul. Eddie Hates Anime and Luxon were two of the people that commented on it, and I was somebody that I'm like that too. I never finished the Tokyo Ghoul anime because of how upset I was with the sheer amount of condensing that they were doing with it. There is so much love lost with the Tokyo Ghoul anime, it's not even funny.
I read Tokyo Ghoul last year, and I made it a point to not check out the anime because people were always saying how bad it was. But I did get my lady to check it out because she was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'll just check it out and like do some comparisons." And she kind of hit me up with the what the hell is going on in this anime compared to its manga? Like, this doesn't make sense. I'm looking at the first couple pages and I'm like, nah, they. So I'm like, okay, yeah, they gutted, huh?
Yep, they did it dirty, and I still have yet to read the manga. I've collected all of Tokyo Ghoul. I'm waiting for a restock to get the box set for Tokyo Ghoul Re, but like it's insane to me. Like, so many people have Tokyo Ghoul as one of their favorite manga of all time, and the anime has just got done so dirty, despite having the episode count that it did. Like, it's bad. It's not a good adaptation.
It's strange because like like in the case of TPN, like I mentioned, where they would have definitely been able to get away with just selling stuff. Like Tokyo Ghoul is another one where it's like you took this property that was doing really well and you didn't believe in it, because otherwise why would you sandbag its production like that? Like you didn't believe in this property. Like you didn't think it would be worth potentially trying to do this 2 years in a row. And that's weird. Like when you have one of the greatest selling manga at that time period in your hands, normally you would expect them to overpad or do something ridiculous like that that would harm it in other ways, like how Black Clover's start is like 2 chapters in the first 6 episodes, is it? Like
It's
something really awkward with its pacing where it's
yes.
just like, you didn't have to do that.
Yep.
You shouldn't have done this.
Well, it's a Studio Pierrot anime, so what do you expect?
And isn't Tokyo Ghoul one too?
I think it actually is. Oh my god, I'm checking that right now. Like I really gotta know. Let's see here. Pulling up Wikipedia. There's Wikipedia. Anime. Yep. It was Studio Pierrot. There you go. That's why.
They've come a long way since Yu Yu Hakusho.
Not necessarily like, in a good way.
Yeah, I said that and I immediately thought of the J. Cole line where he's like, good news, man, you went a long way. Bad news is, you went the wrong way.
Uh-huh. Oh, man. So, I think at the end of the day, there's two reasons for it. Like, one, so like anime studios are the ones that approach the manga light novel publishers and be like, hey, this is the budget, this is what we want to do, and then the publisher signs off on it. And a lot of the anime studios and whatnot, like they want to, they want the best things, so the stuff that's going to bring in the most money for them. And for other things that are just like, well, we'll do this as maybe like a package deal, but we're only going to give it, so much thought and attention. And they do it even for the stuff that makes the most money, and it's crazy. Like, so with Seven Deadly Sins, this is an example of, at least like production. So it was originally done by A1 Studios, which also does Sword Art Online. And the problem there is that when it switched over studios is because A1 Studios decided to tackle Sword Art Online's new season rather than Seven Deadly Sins. They knew that there was more money for them in Sword Art Online than there was in Seven Deadly Sins, and then we as consumers paid the price for it.
Yeah. And because what makes it even worse though is that it harms the reputation of whatever studio takes the project.
Yep.
And so it's like, but some of those studios also might legitimately need some of that money. So it's weird to think that like sometimes they're like, okay, we're gonna take this property and hope that we can like make some adjustments going forward or do something later. Because the other thing that I've always heard is like the A1 Pictures, like they did a movie for Seven Deadly Sins and it didn't do that well either. And I think Seven Deadly Sins just had another movie come out and it only sold like 98,000 tickets.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, like I think the franchise has just kind of imploded, and it's a real shame because while I do think the back 60 chapters of Seven Deadly Sins was bloatware,
very repetitive, very
like basically the sinner shows up and it's like, oh man, this isn't fun. Um, I do think that that entire stretch from like when we first meet the Ten Commandments all the way through the Purgatory arc is actual gas. It's just like once you get to that stuff with the center, boom. So like they would have been so much better served maintaining that project up until around that time period. And then if they decided they didn't want to keep going, then not going. But like it was such a strange decision.
Yeah, yeah. It's sad that it got signed off the way that it did, and it is what it is at this point. At the very least, Four Knights of the Apocalypse is doing well as a new manga, so I'm happy with that. But yeah,
Oh
just
yeah, I've been meaning to check that out. That's the spinoff, right?
it's the sequel.
Yeah.
Yep. It has been very good so far. It's very reminiscent of the original Seven Deadly Sins vibe. So it's been very good so far. So I highly recommend it. But that brings us to the most egregious, the worst example of condensing plot material for the sake of creating a single course anime. We gotta talk about God of High School.
Look, God of High School. Okay, for everybody who like gets to this portion, understand this. I am a busy man, so I try not to sign up for too many things. Like as far as reading, like adding too many things on my plate because I'll end up falling behind sometimes that I feel kind of bad. God of High School is a webtoon that I watched like the first 2 episodes of and read 500 of its chapters in a week. Like, I still make it a point to stay current on God of High School's webtoon. The easiest way to like lead with how badly condensed this was, and like just as an example, is that a lot of anime episodes cap out at like 3 or 4 chapters being adapted in one episode. And usually if you get like 4 chapters in an episode, it was a bunch of action.
Right, like a lot of action, like a lot of fighting and whatnot. So like once you actually string the choreography together, makes sense.
Yeah. That's like on the high end. God of High School first core is either 12 or 13 episodes and adapts 110 chapters. It actually might even be like 117 into those 12, 13 episodes. We're talking like a clip of like 9 chapters per episode, not factoring in just straight up cutting stuff out. Even within combat, stuff is getting skipped now.
Yep.
And the worst part is that like God of High School, when I talk about toy sellers, when I talk about series that would have done a great job and been very popular, God of High School is definitely one of them that if they hadn't done this with, if they hadn't decided that by episode 5 you should be at chapter 40, it would have gone over so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Because the conflict with Sungtae or with like Han and Mori Jin, like building out the teams, because the other thing is that there's like the multiple teams get to come back. The HP system getting removed kind of messed it up too, because you had this HP system where when you get to the fights between Park and Mori, where with the Fox Spirit guy, that fight goes based on the HP system. Mori loses that, and so what it creates is like a world where Mori respects Illipo Park, the one who had the gray hoodie on and
Yep.
was using that one. So like that whole respect to their dynamic gets removed because Mori has a thing for especially being respectful of people who manage to defeat him. So you lose out on that bit of his character writing by taking that moment away. In addition to that, though, Mira, who is set up to be the weakest one throughout most of the arc, ends up, because of Daiwei's suspension, she actually, after Mori loses, has to fight him in his Fox God form, when he's got one of the most powerful borrowed powers that you can get. And so it's like they took away that, where she's like fighting tooth and nail just to get this dude to lose 36 HP. So all these small things are like taken out, and these character moments are just straight up removed because they wanted to speed up getting to the greed dude at the end. And the rushing through that didn't even work because like they guaranteed they could not do extra seasons because they cut out so much stuff that was set up for the later season. So they could have had a franchise that we'd be watching seasons of for like the next 10 years with great fighting and all this other stuff that people would have had multiple characters to like latch onto, different deities to latch onto, and like buy merch for, or different pops of, or plushies of, because of especially with what Han Daiwei's Barred Power was. That's like that thing was drawn to be a plushie. There's so much, just even looking at marketing sides, but then looking at the story of removing the nuance from the triple kick. Like we talked about how the whole point of like Mori bringing out like the true round is that somebody literally figures out the ways that he's hitting the head, the operations, that like the order of operations to his moves so that he can knock you unconscious quickly, and getting all these technical combat or like on the stances, or like how different people like train, like the very way they're training and who they become friends with, like Han Daiwei like training with the dude who had the baseball bat that he broke, and getting the backstory behind why that dude was fighting people with the baseball bat in the first place because it was his dad. It's like all these nuances are just stripped of these characters, and then you just watch them fight each other and you kind of care. Like they included the Mira marriage episode, but they didn't include any of her like actual character arc that comes after that. So it's like they made a cool like 12 13 episode thing, and a lot of people were just like, well, I guess that was just the mocap test for Jujutsu Kaisen.
Pretty much.
And yeah, I'm like, I love JJK, but like we could have had two greats.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, it's got like JJK and God of High School have the same director, and it just goes to show like more thought and care went into JJK than God of High School. And I do legitimately question, like, Crunchyroll was obviously trying to capitalize on the manhwa market. I think Crunchyroll killed the manhwa market for anime, because if you think about it, the only good adaptation that they had was Tower of God, and even then people were ragging on it, mostly because they just wanted to rag on it. But like, God of High School had this insane rush job, and then you had Noblesse that came out at like the end of 2020, and they didn't even like tell people, oh yeah, you had to read you had to watch the OVAs in order to understand what's going on from episode 1 of this anime. But we're not going to tell you that. We're just going to jump right in, and it's fine. And it's just like, holy crap, this is awful. This is bad.
It's genuinely bad marketing, which is why I had to like just straight up be like, yeah, like even from a business angle, this is dumb.
Yeah, it really is.
And you read the first 40 chapters.
Yes. So I decided to read God of High School the night before we are recording this. I'd always made it was always my intent to eventually read it, just because I've been aware of the sheer amount of chapters that were condensed into 13 episodes. But holy crap, like, not only do they condense as much as they do, but the amount of things that they skip or change was crazy. Like the fact that Jin Mori was trained by the acupuncture specialist of like the six, like they just kind of throw it into the anime, but like it's a completely different thing in the manhwa, where like he finds him like bound in a room, then he goes like rustling through a drawer and finds like the god pellets and consumes them, and then he like frees the acupuncturist, who we find out is the guy that lost his arm to Jin Mori's grandfather. It's just like, holy cow. Not to mention, I mean, like, and this is, you know, potentially a stylistic choice of the manhwa, it's a lot funnier and gag driven in the manhwa than it was in the anime. The anime was just like, oh, we're super serious here, and everything is so angry.
I genuinely describe God of High School as Korean Dragon Ball Z, and I don't mean that as an insult.
No, it's not an insult. Which, I mean, because and this is something I've learned from my friends that have read God of High School, but the fact that like they every once in a while they more or less kind of reset the power levels of characters. They do that in Dragon Ball too. Like, It's
Well, yeah. So that's the other thing is that Mori also has multiple forms, and there's even a point where he like gets a new body. So it's like we have like multiple body. Like so when I say like toy selling potential was insane, and it was a good story. It is a good story that I enjoy, even like as over the top as it is. And there's characters who have like genuine like side characters who have their own arcs. And and the other thing about this is it's a story that is willing to put the main like protagonist like in Morihjin to the side. Like there's a part of the story where you're waiting for Morihjin to show up for like 100 chapters.
which is
Oh, I
just like
love it.
Dragon Ball. I like that is literally what happens with the Saiyan saga. Goku dies in order to defeat Raditz and has to come back in order to save the guys. Like because the Saiyans are coming. Like it's a similar scenario, or even with like the Buu saga, where again
Yeah.
Goku dies and has to come back to beat Buu. Like that is something that I can appreciate, and like it's not something that you get to see as much. And unfortunately, like because there really hasn't been any kind of news whatsoever on a continuation for God of High School or a continuation of Tower of God. Like it was one of those things where it was just like kind of said that way, but like nothing has happened. It's like we're more than halfway through 2021 and there's been no word on anything. Like
Oh,
they just shot themselves in the foot so bad with God of High School, and it's
Mujin Park is one of my favorite megalomaniacs that I've ever encountered in a story. I enjoy him in the same way that a lot of comic readers enjoy Doctor Doom.
mm-hmm.
Uh, like, and his character has so many like nice little nuanced human traits that like kind of come into play, and especially because this is the series that isn't afraid of time. So like, there's a point where God of High School actually does have a 17-year time skip, and they make it a point like, and unlike it's not like people are stagnant. Like there's a bunch of growth that different characters have too, and like the state of the world changes drastically, and it's all stuff that was kind of set up already, but it's like we skipped a bunch of infrastructural stuff because that certain aspects of the infrastructure wouldn't have been important until now. But there's still like the God of High School tournaments, like the focus on like what it means to like actually operate in this universe, and like Mujin Park's goals with the God of High School tournament. And it's like finding Morihjin was a part of that, sure, but like it was so much deeper and goes so much further into like what he really had as a vision for humanity that it's like, well, people will never get to see like what made almost any of these characters good characters.
Mm-hmm. It's extremely unfortunate. It really is. And like all for what? Just so that they could skip ahead because they weren't confident that they could make things interesting as is. Like
And I'm like, dog, it's your own streaming platform. You're not paying for advertising space. Like you're not worried about advertising space the same way that a lot of these other companies are. Especially now that Crunchyroll is owned by HBO.
they're wait,
Or
no, Funimation.
no, Sony.
Sony and Funimation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was somebody like, but Crunchyroll for some reason does have all of its anime on HBO Max right now, or
Yeah, they did
whatever.
and
There's
Funimation has theirs on Hulu, so it's just a lot of cross-platform.
yeah. So it's like but like you definitely had money. Like these big companies are invested in you. So like, give them something that will keep them invested in you instead of making yourself and marketing yourself as only a middleman.
Mm-hmm.
Because I might not like every Netflix original or like, but the fact that Netflix at least tries to make their own content is a good thing because they try to
Yes.
give you a reason besides watching Friends to be on here.
Yep. Although we do not, like we said with Mappa, we do not condone their business practices with payment and whatnot, as we have been learning. That is absolutely ridiculous.
And apparently Netflix made it a point to yell at Mappa for fumbling the bag so hard, and I'm like, well, y'all fault.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't make sure that things were good, so what did you think?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like they sabotaged their own brand at that point, especially like doing God of High School and Noblest in the same year and having the same
And
issues
Tower
of
of God. Like, we started with Tower of God, And, like, that was a good start. And so we're thinking, like, oh, God of High School is just going to be better. And then it wasn't. Like, we had a good start, and it... Ugh.
The OP was great, too, for God of High School. It was like, all right, cool, but you know what the big flag was in the first episode? When I realized that the opening was taken from an episode. Like over half like almost every action scene in the opening is a direct cut from an episode, just like layered with different coloring or something.
With a neon color scheme on top. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which quickly made the opening go from, oh, this is really cool, to, oh, they cut corners everywhere.
I mean, when you think about it, they cut corners with the song, too, because I don't know if you've ever heard the full version, but the amount of in the song is ridiculous. Like, that is literally 1/3 of the song. It's just... it just hurts the ears after a while.
Like, so much potential wasted.
Yep.
That's the part that kills me. So much stuff you could have done with that series. It would have been... Like, it really, truly would have done a lot for, like, webtoons and in general, like... would have kind of put that on the map, but maybe that was what they were worried about, is like other people moving into the market if they did too well.
Well, on the plus side, at least for webtoon, like the live action stuff that they've been doing, from what I've seen, has been getting a positive reception. It was just like the anime stuff that wasn't. And right now, all eyes are on the adaptation for Lore Olympus. That is going to be the big one. And that's being done by the Jim Henson Company, which I'm excited for, because I love the Jim Henson Company, and I'm very curious to see what they're going to do with it. But I think that's really going to be... This is that last horse in the race that's going to really determine whether or not Webtoon can successfully take off or not. Because if Lore Olympus fails, and considering how that is a big flagship on their platform... doesn't bode well for the rest of Webtoon, especially after Crunchyroll fumbled as much as they did.
That's especially thinking about it, like, Noblesse is one of the ones that used to get advertised a lot too. God of High School is one of their flagships also. And Tower of God was on break for a long time, so it's kind of like they kind of just sandbagged the Webtoon community all around with that.
At least the manhwa side, yes.
Yeah. Which, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it really is. Well, that being said, Aniki, did you have any other words to say on God of High School before we wrap things up?
Please give it a read. Just give it a read. Check out, like, the first 40 chapters. If you watch the first 5 episodes, at least read the first 40 chapters. Give yourself that much. I promise you it's worth it. Enjoyable series,
I agree.
Especially martial arts.
As someone that did decide to read the first 40 chapters in the span of a day, it is worth it. It is definitely worth it. It is a vast improvement. Other than the fight setting. The fight setting in the anime was definitely better, but like that was the only thing that it really did.
Yeah, that was the median. Just, they did do well with the choreography. I can give them that.
Yep.
And stuff.
Well, I mean, even the ring, I'm saying, was like...
Yeah.
Compared to the manhwa, where it's just like, we're at a high school gymnasium, probably. And here's a boxing ring.
Yeah, that is kind of the vibe it has, but... That goes away in the later arcs, too, so don't worry.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So... Well, that being said, that really wraps up our conversation on things. And, again, while we did, we have our thoughts on the bad side of anime changes. Like we said, there are a lot of good ones that can be seen. And even if you see things from a certain perspective, you got to understand that there are other things that work. Especially with My Hero Academia and the My Villain Academia shuffling around that they're doing. So if you are miraculously 2 hours into this podcast, I thank you for sticking around. I definitely want to hear what you guys think down in the comment section. And if you have any particular thoughts on anime changes that were good or bad, feel free to let me know down in the comments. But Aniki, I'm going to give you your chance to give your plug-in at the end here. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Axel. I'm glad you had me on. Enjoyable. You know, like in general, I try to do more stuff with the people in the manga chat, so I'm glad we got to do this. I'll try to do it again if you ever need me to come on or want me to come on again, and I'll try to be available. Hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. You know, you can always find me on YouTube at AnikiSmashFSP. Same thing for Twitter if you don't necessarily feel like watching videos, but occasionally want to see me explain things in painfully long details or point out random things in the manga that nobody would be thinking about, like Deku not eating his pork chops because he's depressed, even though that's his favorite food. So yeah, that's what I'm there for. I'm actually doing a lot of research for a Sun God Nika video right now. So if you're a One Piece fan and that particular bit of lore has been interesting you, then that'll be fun. My channel's full of random, very deep dives with theological and scientific analysis being cross-referenced with manga.
Indeed.
That's kind of like you would like it. There you go.
Yes, if you want some big brain flexes on My Hero and One Piece series, definitely subscribe. Trademark Axel. Big brain flex. No, just kidding. But
no,
I say it all the time. But yes, I do. Because it is. It absolutely is. I think it's a shame that more series outside of One Piece don't necessarily get the amount of theorizing. I mean, JJK does. But you do a lot of great work with My Hero Academia. So it's definitely appreciated, the amount of theory crafting that you do. Especially since it's not just things that are out of the air, like some people who like to just read into things that really don't need to be read into, but you know, it's just how it is. But I mean, that being said, I thank you, Aniki, for coming on the podcast. And yes, it was a very enjoyable one, very enjoyable 2 hours. We pushed the limits. We went plus ultra on the time because there was just that much to talk about. So I thank you for being on here. And until next time, guys, my name is Axel Blaze. And for the love of God, please read God of High School. Just please read God of High School, please.
Your life will be better for it.
It's so much better. It really is. So bye-bye, everybody.
See ya.